Do you want to know what's waiting for you on the other side? I'm not just talking about what I saw, the city, the peace, the light. I'm talking about the love. The kind of love that fills you so completely, it makes every other fear, every other worry, fade away. The kind of love that says, you belong here. You're meant to be here. But here's the catch, you have to choose it. You have to make the decision. No one else can do it for you. What if you ignore it? What if you say, I'll think about it tomorrow, or I've got plenty of time? What if tomorrow never comes? What if you're left behind, just like so many I saw in that church, screaming for a second chance that will never come?
Welcome, everyone. What you're about to hear is not just a testimony. It's a life-changing experience that could make you question everything you've ever known about time, choices, and eternity. Stay with us, because the truth shared here might just be the most important thing you hear today. If you're ready to see beyond the surface and confront the reality of what's to come, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who need to hear it. And if this resonates with you, leave a comment below, or even share a prayer for yourself or someone else. Let's make this conversation one that changes lives.
Have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid that it leaves your heart racing and your hands trembling? A dream that feels more real than life itself? Let me ask you something. What if that dream wasn't just a dream? What if it was a warning? I was someone like you, someone who thought I had time. Time to figure things out. Time to make changes. Time to live however I wanted, and then, maybe later, think about eternity. But everything changed one night. I never asked for this, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But it happened, and now I have to tell you. It started as a quiet nudge, a voice I couldn't explain. I brushed it off, thinking, just another restless night. But the voice came back. Louder. Sharper. Impossible to ignore. It said, you're running out of time. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just my mind playing tricks. Have you ever felt that tug? That moment when your heart feels heavy, like someone's trying to get your attention? That's what this was, but worse. The voice didn't stop. It followed me into my dreams, into the quiet moments of my day, and even into places where I thought I could escape it. And then, one night, the voice wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real. I walked outside, and the air felt strange, thick, like it was pressing down on me. That's when I felt it. Hands, cold but strong, lifting me into the air. Before I could scream, I was above the clouds, moving so fast that the world below became nothing but a blur. Levi, the voice thundered, shaking everything around me, your time is almost up. Do you know what it feels like to be completely helpless? To feel like your choices are no longer your own? I was terrified, but even more than that, I was ashamed. I had ignored every chance to do what was right. And now, it was too late to turn back. The brightness around me was blinding. I tried to cover my eyes, but it felt like the light wasn't just outside, it was piercing through me, exposing every thought, every secret, every excuse. And then, the words came again, quit your life of pretending. Quit it all, or you will lose everything. I woke up gasping, my chest heaving as if I'd been underwater for hours. But here's the thing, this wasn't over. When I looked at my reflection, I saw a faint mark on my wrist, like a reminder that I couldn't shake. Do you think this was just a dream? Maybe you're wondering if I imagined it all. I wish I could say I did. But the events that followed proved otherwise. The voice didn't stop. It wouldn't stop. And what came next? It wasn't just another dream. Stay with me. Let me tell you about the life I thought was so normal, so safe, and how it unraveled faster than I ever could have imagined. Trust me, if you think this couldn't happen to you, think again. Because the truth is, no one is as safe as they think they are. Levi's ordinary beginning. Let me tell you about my life before that night. If you had seen me, you wouldn't have thought anything was wrong. I lived a simple life. I worked hard, paid my bills, and had plans for the future. Nothing about me stood out. Just a regular person trying to make it. Maybe you're the same. You wake up, go about your day, and tell yourself there's plenty of time. You think, tomorrow, I'll take things seriously. Tomorrow, I'll focus on what really matters. But what if tomorrow never comes? For me, every day felt the same. I woke up, got dressed, and went to work. I had a steady job at a lab, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. My coworkers liked me. My boss even called me reliable. I thought I was doing everything right. But deep down, there was a restlessness I couldn't explain. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I felt like something was missing. But I shrugged it off. Why mess with what's working, right? The first time I heard the voice, I was lying in bed. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Levi, you're not living the way you should. You need to change. I sat up, my heart racing. It felt like someone was in the room with me. But when I looked around, there was nothing. Just silence. I tried to ignore it. Maybe I was stressed. Maybe it was a dream. But the voice didn't stop. Days passed, and it kept coming back, growing louder. Quit pretending. Quit wasting your time. It started to feel like the air around me was heavier, like I couldn't breathe properly. Have you ever felt like that? Like something is pressing down on you, warning you, but you keep brushing it off? That's what I did. I told myself I was imagining things. But then strangers started saying things that shook me to my core. One morning, as I was getting off the bus for work, a man I didn't know grabbed my arm. His eyes locked onto mine, and he said, "You shouldn't be here. You're wasting your time." I froze. He walked away before I could ask what he meant. I tried to laugh it off. What a strange coincidence, I thought. But it happened again. And again. Different people all saying the same thing, "You don't belong here." The fear started creeping in. I'd wake up at night, drenched in sweat, hearing that voice. "Levi, your time is running out." I wanted to shake it off, pretend it wasn't real. But the signs were everywhere. It was like the world around me was trying to scream something I didn't want to hear. And then, the final straw. One evening, as I was walking home, a woman stopped me on the street. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at me, her face pale, and whispered, "Why are you still here? Don't you know they're waiting for you?" I didn't understand what she meant. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening, something bigger than me. And deep down, I knew. I couldn't keep pretending my life was normal. What about you? Have you ever felt like the universe, or something far greater, is trying to get your attention? I didn't know it then, but my time was running out. What came next would tear my world apart. Are you sure you're ready to hear it? Because once you know, there's no going back. The command to leave everything behind. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. The voice was louder, the stranger's words were sharper, and every moment felt like the walls around me were closing in. But still, I held on to my life. My job, my routine, my plans, I clung to them like a lifeline. What would you do if everything you built started to feel wrong? What if every comfort you had became a warning instead of a blessing? That's what happened to me. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The voice. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It roared through me like thunder, shaking every nerve in my body. Levi, leave it all behind. Quit the life you're holding on to. If you don't, you'll lose everything. I shot up, gasping for air. My chest felt tight, like a weight was pressing down on me. I ran to the mirror, hoping to see, I don't know, something that made sense. Instead, I saw my own reflection staring back, pale and trembling. And there, on my wrist, the mark was brighter now, glowing faintly in the dim light. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. I told myself, this can't be happening. But deep down, I knew. The life I thought was safe was slipping through my fingers. The next morning, I couldn't focus at work. Every sound, every movement around me felt wrong, like I didn't belong there anymore. Then, as I walked through the lab, one of my coworkers, a man I barely spoke to, stopped me. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Why are you still here? You're not supposed to be in this place." His words hit me like a punch. He didn't know about the dreams. He didn't know about the voice. And yet, here he was, saying the exact same thing. I tried to brush it off, but it didn't stop. People I'd never met started saying things that made my blood run cold. Strangers in the street. A woman on the bus. Even a kid at the grocery store. You don't belong here. Have you ever felt like the universe, or something much bigger, was screaming at you to wake up? That's how it felt for me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to my boss and told him I have to quit. He laughed at first, thinking I was joking. But when he saw my face, his smile disappeared. "Levi," he said, "you've been one of my best workers. What are you going to do if you leave? Where will you go?" I didn't have an answer. I just knew I couldn't stay. I packed up my things and walked out of that building for the last time. The moment I stepped outside, I felt the air shift around me. It was colder, heavier. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't alone. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. That night, I stood in my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. My heart was racing, and my thoughts were spinning. Was I crazy? Had I made a mistake? What if I was wrong? Then, the ground beneath me started to shake. At first, I thought it was an earthquake. But when I tried to leave the room, I couldn't. It was as if an invisible force held me in place. I screamed for help, but my family didn't hear me. I could see them through the doorway, sitting in the living room, completely unaware of what was happening to me. I fell to my knees, trembling. And that's when it happened. The voice returned, stronger than ever, and it wasn't asking this time. "Levi, you've left your job. Now, leave your life of comfort. Go to the place I've called you to. Pray like you've never prayed before. If you don't, you won't survive what's coming." As the voice faded, the shaking stopped. I sat there in the silence, tears streaming down my face. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't my imagination. I knew then that my life would never be the same. And yet, I had no idea how much darker things would get. Do you think you'd be ready if this happened to you? What if everything you thought you knew was stripped away, and you were left with nothing but a choice? Because the next step I took, it led me to a place I can never forget. Are you ready to hear what came next? Because once I take you there, there's no turning back. The descent into the other world. I didn't know what to expect that night, but I never thought I'd face death. Not like this. It started with the room growing colder. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the chill wasn't like anything I'd felt before. It didn't creep over me, it hit me, sharp and unrelenting, like the air itself was alive and watching. I sat on the edge of my bed, trying to shake the feeling, when I saw it. A shadow moved across the room even though the lights were on. I wasn't alone. My chest tightened, and I wanted to call for help, but something told me no one would hear me. Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when there's no one there? Like eyes you can't see are following your every move? That's how it felt. And then, the room started to shake. Not like an earthquake, it was uneven, like something was forcing it to move. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled under me. That's when I realized I couldn't leave. I was trapped. The voice came back, but this time it wasn't just in my head. It surrounded me, filling the room like a storm. Levi, it's time. Time for what? I didn't understand. My heart was pounding, and my thoughts were racing. I shouted, "What do you want from me?" But the only answer I got was silence. And then, they appeared. Two figures stepped into the room. They weren't human, I knew that the moment I saw them. One was cloaked in blinding light, so bright it hurt to look at. The other was darker, with shadows rippling around it like smoke. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. I knew why they were there. One reached out, and before I could scream, I was pulled from my body. I could see it, my body, sitting lifeless on the bed, frozen in place. And I wasn't in it anymore. I panicked. I tried to fight, to resist, but it was useless. They held me tight, their grip unyielding. And then, we began to move. The room disappeared, replaced by endless darkness. The air was heavy, suffocating. I could hear whispers all around me, low, guttural voices, speaking words I couldn't understand. My captors didn't say a word as they carried me through the void. Do you know what it's like to feel completely powerless? To be dragged into a place you don't understand, with no way to stop it? That's how I felt. We moved faster and faster, the darkness around us growing deeper. And then, out of nowhere, the whispers turned into screams. Horrible, gut-wrenching screams that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I tried to cover my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't just outside, it was inside me, echoing in my mind. I looked ahead, and that's when I saw it. A faint, flickering light in the distance. At first, I thought it was hope. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't. The light revealed shapes, twisted, writhing shapes. Millions of them. And then I saw their faces. They weren't human anymore. They had been, once, but now they were something else. Their eyes were hollow, their mouths twisted into screams that never stopped. Their bodies were broken, scarred, as if they had been torn apart and put back together wrong. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. The light forced me to see. And then, one of the figures holding me spoke for the first time. Its voice was calm, almost indifferent. This is where they stay. I didn't understand. Who? I asked, my voice shaking. The figure didn't answer. It didn't have to. I knew who they were. They were the ones who didn't listen. The ones who ignored the warnings. The ones who thought they had more time. As we hovered over the sea of lost souls, I could feel their pain. It wasn't just physical, it was deeper, sharper, as if every regret they'd ever had was being carved into them over and over again. And then I heard a voice rise above the screams. A voice I recognized. Levi! I froze. My blood turned to ice. It was my father's voice. He had passed years ago, and I had always believed he was at peace. But now he was here. I looked down, scanning the faces below, and then I saw him. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with a pain I can't describe. He reached up, his hands trembling. "Why didn't you listen?" he cried. "Why didn't you tell me?" I wanted to help him, to reach out and pull him out of that horrible place. But the figures holding me wouldn't let me go. I screamed, "Let me help him," but they only tightened their grip. And then the light faded and the darkness swallowed him whole. I was shaking, my mind racing. Was this my future? Was this where I would end up? The figures didn't answer my questions. They only continued forward, deeper into the darkness. I don't know how long we traveled. Time didn't seem to exist in that place. But eventually, we stopped. What I saw next was worse than anything I had imagined. Are you ready to hear what came after this? Because once I tell you, you'll never forget it. The vision of the lost souls. We stopped in a place so dark that I couldn't see my own hands. The silence was worse than the screams I had heard before. It wasn't empty, it was heavy, like it carried the weight of every regret, every sin, every cry that was never answered. I wanted to speak, to ask where we were, but the words wouldn't come. And then, just ahead, I saw them. At first, they were just shapes, blurred and twisted, like shadows moving in thick smoke. But as we moved closer, the shadows became people, or what was left of them. Have you ever seen someone completely hopeless? I mean really hopeless, where there's no light in their eyes, no strength left to fight? That's what these people looked like. But worse. Their faces were etched with pain. Not just physical pain, something deeper. Their eyes were hollow, filled with torment and regret. Their hands reached out, clawing at the air, at the ground, at each other, but it was pointless. There was nothing to hold on to. I stood frozen, unable to look away. I wanted to, but something wouldn't let me. It was like I was being forced to see them, to feel what they felt. And then I heard them. Not just screams, but words. They were crying out, "Help me," and "Why didn't anyone tell me?" over and over again. Their voices were raw, broken, like they had been screaming for years with no one listening. One voice stood out. It was a man, his body bent and trembling. He looked up at me, his face covered in tears, and said, "I thought I had more time." Those words hit me like a punch to the chest. I thought I had more time. Have you ever told yourself that? That you'll fix things later? That you'll get it right someday? That's what he thought too. And now, here he was, stuck in a place where time no longer mattered. The figures who had brought me here stood silently, watching as I struggled to process what I was seeing. I turned to one of them and whispered, "Why are you showing me this?" The figure didn't answer, but suddenly, the scene around me shifted. The people I had been watching disappeared, replaced by others. And that's when I saw them. Friends. Family. People I knew. One by one, their faces appeared in the darkness. They looked at me with eyes full of blame and pain, their voices trembling as they asked, "Why didn't you warn us? Why didn't you tell us the truth?" I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. What could I say? How could I explain? I wanted to reach out to them, to tell them I was sorry, but I couldn't move. My arms felt like lead, my legs like stone. Have you ever felt that kind of guilt? The kind that wraps around your chest and squeezes until you can't breathe? That's what I felt in that moment. And then, as if the darkness itself was alive, it began to pull them away. They cried out, begging for help, but I was powerless to stop it. The shadows swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but the sound of their voices echoing in my ears. I turned back to the figures and screamed, "Why? Why are you showing me this?" Finally, one of them spoke. Its voice was calm, but the words cut deep. These are the souls who were never told. These are the ones who thought they had more time. I wanted to argue, to say it wasn't my fault, but the truth was, it was. I had stayed silent when I should have spoken. I had chosen comfort over truth, and now I was being forced to see the cost. The figure pointed ahead, and the darkness parted, revealing a massive chasm. It stretched so far in every direction that I couldn't see the end of it. And inside, I could hear them, the souls I had just seen, screaming as they fell deeper and deeper into the abyss. I felt my knees buckle, and I dropped to the ground. "Please," I begged, "don't let this be real." But it was real. I knew it was. The figure reached down and lifted me to my feet. "There is more to see," it said, its voice heavy with finality. I wanted to refuse, to run, to wake up and pretend none of this had happened. But there was no waking up. The figure began to lead me forward toward the edge of the chasm, and I knew I couldn't stop it. What I saw next would stay with me forever. Do you think you could handle seeing what I saw? Could you stand at the edge and look into the truth of eternity? If you think you're ready, then stay with me. Because the next part, it's the part that changes everything. The terrifying message. I stood at the edge of that chasm, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The screams from below clawed at my ears, and the darkness seemed alive, swirling like it wanted to drag me in two. I felt so small, so powerless. The figure beside me turned, its eyes piercing through me. Then it spoke, and its words hit me like a thunderclap. "Levi, this is what happens when warnings are ignored. This is where those who reject the truth end up." I shook my head, my voice trembling. No, this can't be real. There has to be another way. Something to fix this. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it lifted a hand and pointed across the chasm. The air around me shifted, and suddenly, I wasn't just hearing screams, I was seeing them. The abyss opened, and inside, I saw people. People who were falling endlessly, their faces twisted in terror. Some of them were reaching out, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing there. One of them turned toward me. I froze. It was a woman, her face pale and streaked with tears. She looked right at me, and her voice rose above the others. "Why didn't you tell me?" she screamed. "You knew, but you said nothing." My stomach dropped. Her words felt like a knife, cutting through every excuse I had ever told myself. Have you ever had that moment where you realize you could have done more? Where the weight of what you didn't do crashes down on you all at once? That's what this felt like. But worse. So much worse. The figure's voice broke through my thoughts. "You think you have time, Levi. But time is the greatest lie of all. Every second wasted is another soul lost." I wanted to run, to wake up, to escape this nightmare. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, forced to watch as more faces appeared in the abyss. And then I heard it. A voice I knew better than my own. It was my brother. He was crying out, his hands clawing at the empty air. Levi! Why didn't you warn me? Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to tell him I was sorry, that I didn't know this would happen. But the truth was, I did know. Deep down, I had always known. How many times had I brushed off the chance to talk to him about what mattered? How many times had I told myself he wouldn't listen or it's not the right time? But now it was too late. The figure beside me spoke again, its voice heavy with something I couldn't name. Levi, the choices you make don't just affect you. They ripple outward, touching everyone around you. This isn't just about your life, it's about theirs too. I felt like the ground was falling out from under me. I looked back at the abyss, at the faces staring up at me with pain and anger and regret. And then, everything went silent. The screams stopped. The shadows stopped moving. The air around me became so still it felt like the world had stopped breathing. And that's when I heard it. A voice unlike any other. It wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the darkness, every corner of me. It was calm, but it carried a weight that made my knees buckle. Levi, my church has forgotten me. I turned, but there was no one there. Just the voice echoing all around me. My people have become comfortable. They don't pray. They don't seek me. They think they have time, but they don't. Tell them, Levi. Tell them I am coming, and I will not wait. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. What if they don't listen? I whispered. The voice replied, then they will face what you see before you. I felt my chest tighten, fear clawing at my insides. What could I do? What could I say to make them believe? The figure beside me stepped forward, its presence towering over me. Levi, this is your warning. This is their warning. If they don't turn back now, the doors will close, and they will be left behind. Left behind. The words hung in the air like a curse. What does that mean? What happens to those who are left? I wanted to ask, but before I could, the darkness began to shift again. The abyss faded, and in its place, I saw something even more terrifying. Are you sure you want to know what I saw? Because once you hear it, you'll never forget it. If you're ready, stay with me. But I'll warn you now, what comes next will change the way you see everything. The church left behind. I thought the screams were the worst thing I'd ever hear. I thought seeing the lost souls falling into the abyss would haunt me forever. But what I saw next, it shook me to my core. The figure raised its hand again, and the darkness around us shifted. It was like stepping through a curtain into another world. Suddenly, I was standing in a church. It looked familiar, rows of wooden pews, sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, the faint smell of old hymn books. For a moment, I thought I was back home. But then I noticed the people. They weren't worshiping. They weren't praying. They were weeping. Have you ever seen despair so deep that it breaks someone? That's what I saw in that church. People were falling to their knees, clutching their chests, screaming at the top of their lungs. A woman near the front slammed her fists against the altar, crying out, "Why, God? Why did you leave me?" A man in the corner was pulling at his hair, his face twisted in anger and pain. He shouted, "You took them. You took my family and left me behind." It was chaos. People were pounding on the walls, running up and down the aisles, their voices shaking the very air around them. I turned to the figure beside me and whispered, "What is this place?" The figure's voice was calm, but it carried the weight of what I was seeing. "This is the church after the rapture. The words hit me like a hammer. The rapture. It had happened. And these people, these were the ones who were left. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The figure motioned toward the pulpit, and I saw a man standing there, trembling. He was holding a Bible, but his hands were shaking so badly that he could barely keep it open. He shouted, "I was the pastor of this church. I preached every Sunday. Why didn't he take me?" The crowd turned on him, their faces filled with rage. "You lied to us," one man screamed. "You told us we were safe." A woman grabbed the pastor's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "You said we didn't need to change. You said we were fine just the way we were." The pastor fell to his knees, sobbing. "I didn't know," he cried. "I didn't know." I felt my stomach churn. How many times had I heard messages that made me feel comfortable? How many times had I told myself, "I'm fine. I'm doing enough"? The figure beside me spoke again. "Levi, they heard the truth, but they didn't live it. They had the chance to change, but they held on to their pride, their comfort, their sin. And now, it's too late." The words echoed in my mind, "Too late." I looked around the church, and my heart broke. Parents were searching for their children, shouting their names, only to realize they were gone. Spouses were crying for their partners, falling to the floor when they realized they'd been left behind. One man slammed his fist against the door, shouting, "Let me out. I can't stay here." But no matter how hard he tried, the door wouldn't open. I turned back to the figure. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure's reply was simple, but it carried a weight I couldn't bear. "So you can warn them." Warn them. I thought about everyone I knew, friends, family, people I had seen in church every Sunday. Were they ready? Would they be taken, or would they end up like this? And what about me? Would I be taken, or would I be one of the ones left behind, crying out for a second chance that would never come? The figure motioned again, and the scene around me began to fade. But before it disappeared completely, I heard one last voice. It was a young girl, sitting in the front pew. She was holding a doll, her eyes wide with fear. She looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "Why didn't they tell me? Why didn't they tell me about this?" Her words pierced through me. Have you ever thought about how many people you pass by every day, how many people you care about, who don't know what's coming? What if they asked you that question? What would you say? As the scene dissolved, I felt a weight pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the girl's voice from my mind. And then, everything went silent again. The figure turned to me, its eyes filled with something I couldn't quite understand. "Levi, there is still hope. But the window is closing. If they do not repent, they will face this. And worse." Worse? How could it get worse than this? Before I could ask, the darkness around me began to shift again. This time, I saw something different. Something brighter. Are you ready to hear what I saw? Because it's the part that changes everything. Stay with me. You need to hear this. A glimpse of redemption. The darkness around me began to shift again, but this time it wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was like the air itself became lighter, softer, and filled with a sense of peace I can't explain. For the first time since this all began, I felt hope. A soft light appeared in the distance. It wasn't blinding like before, it was gentle, warm, and inviting. It drew me in, and as it got closer, I felt something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever: love. Have you ever felt a love so pure that it melts every fear, every doubt? That's what this light carried. The figure beside me stopped, and for a moment, I thought I was alone. Then, a voice spoke, not from the figure, but from the light. It was calm and strong, but filled with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. "Levi, do you see now?" I didn't know how to answer. My voice trembled as I whispered, "See what?" The light seemed to grow, and suddenly, the space around me changed. I was no longer standing on the edge of darkness. Instead, I was looking at something so beautiful, so perfect, that it took my breath away. It was a city. The walls were like gold, shimmering and clear, and the gates were made of pearl, glowing with a light that seemed alive. The streets looked like they were made of crystal, reflecting the glory of the place around them. But what struck me the most wasn't the beauty of the city. It was the sound. Have you ever heard a sound so beautiful that it feels like it's pulling your very soul toward it? That's what I heard. Millions of voices, singing in perfect harmony, lifting up praise to the one who sat on the throne. The light spoke again. "This is the place I have prepared for my people. A place where there is no pain, no sorrow, no fear. Only joy, peace, and love." I felt tears streaming down my face. "Is this heaven?" I asked. The light didn't answer directly. Instead, it said, "This is where those who choose me will dwell. Those who obey my voice and follow my ways." I wanted to move closer, to step into the city and feel the fullness of that love. But the figure beside me placed a hand on my shoulder, stopping me. "Not yet," it said. "You are not ready." I turned to the figure, my heart sinking. Why? Why can't I go in? The figure's voice was steady, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "Because your time has not yet come. There is still work for you to do." I looked back at the city, my heart aching. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that place, to escape everything I had seen before. But then the light spoke again, and its words pierced through me. "Levi, this is why you must warn them. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them that I am waiting, but I will not wait forever. The gates are open now, but one day they will close." Have you ever felt the weight of responsibility fall on you all at once? Like the choices you make could change everything for someone else? That's how I felt in that moment. The light began to fade, and I panicked. "Wait!" I cried. "Don't leave me here! Please, don't send me back!" But the voice was firm. "You must return. They need to hear. They need to know." The city grew dim, and the warmth began to fade. I felt myself being pulled away, back toward the darkness, back toward the place I had come from. "Levi," the voice said one last time, "remember what you have seen. Tell them so that they will not be left behind." And then, just like that, the light was gone. I was standing in the dark again, the figure beside me silent. My chest felt heavy, my mind racing with everything I had just seen. What would you do if you were given a glimpse of a place like that? Would it change the way you live? Would it make you think about the choices you've made? The figure turned to me, its voice low and steady. "It's time to go back." I wanted to argue, to beg for just one more moment in that place of peace. But before I could say anything, I felt myself being pulled again, faster and faster, as if the very air was dragging me away. And then, I woke up. What happened next changed everything. Are you ready to hear it? Because this is the part that will make you question everything you thought you knew about life and death. The return to the body. The pull was relentless, like an unseen force dragging me faster than I could think. The peace of the light was gone, replaced by a whirlwind of emotions, fear, sorrow, urgency. It was like my entire being knew that what lay ahead would change me forever. I didn't feel my body at first. Just the weight of everything I had seen pressing down on me. And then, with a jolt, it hit me. My chest felt heavy, like I had been holding my breath for hours. My arms and legs felt stiff, as though they weren't mine anymore. And then, there was the sound, people shouting, voices filled with panic. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was a circle of faces staring down at me. Their expressions were a mix of relief and shock, as if they couldn't believe I was really there. Have you ever woken up from a dream so vivid that for a moment, you don't know what's real? That's how I felt. Except this wasn't a dream. The room was bright, but it felt cold. My hands were trembling, and my breathing was shallow. Someone grabbed my arm and shouted my name, but it took a moment for the words to sink in. Levi! You're back! Back. The word echoed in my mind. Back from where? Back to what? I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it was made of lead. My mind was racing with images, darkness, the abyss, the city of light. I wanted to speak, to tell them everything I had seen, but the words wouldn't come. Someone was praying loudly, their voice shaking with emotion. I looked around and saw tears streaming down their face. They were thanking God over and over again. And then it hit me, I wasn't supposed to be here. I had begged to stay in the light, to remain in that place of peace and love. But I was back. Why? Why had I been sent back? That's when I heard the voice again. Not out loud this time, but deep within me. Levi, there's no more time to waste. Tell them. Warn them. Show them the truth. The words were clear, like a command etched into my very soul. And in that moment, I understood. I had been given a second chance. Not for my sake, but for theirs. For you. I looked at the faces around me, and all I could think was, do they know? Do they understand what's coming? Do you? Do you know how close we are to the edge? How quickly everything can change? My voice finally came back, though it was weak and shaky. I have to tell you, I whispered. I have to tell you what I saw. The room fell silent. Every eye was on me, every ear straining to hear. And so I began to speak. I told them about the darkness, about the abyss filled with lost souls. I told them about the screams, the faces twisted in pain, the voices crying out for a second chance that would never come. I told them about the church left behind, the chaos, the despair, the anger. The cries of people who thought they were safe but realized too late that they weren't. And then I told them about the city of light. The place of peace and love, waiting for those who choose it. The voice that spoke to me, calling me back to warn others before it's too late. Some of them listened with tears in their eyes. Others looked at me with doubt, as if they couldn't believe what I was saying. But I didn't care. I couldn't stop. I couldn't let them walk away without knowing. What about you? If you were in that room with me, what would you have done? Would you believe me, or would you brush it off, telling yourself there's still time? Because that's the lie we all tell ourselves, isn't it? That we'll have time to make things right. Time to change. Time to live the way we're meant to. But let me ask you something, what if time runs out? What if this moment, right here, right now, is the warning you've been waiting for? As I sat there, surrounded by people who didn't fully understand the weight of what I had seen, I felt a fire inside me. A fire that wouldn't let me stay silent. The figure's words echoed in my mind, warn them. Tell them the gates are open now, but one day they will close. And that's what I'm doing now. You need to hear this. Because what I saw next, the final message I was given, it wasn't just for me. It was for you. Stay with me. The next part is the most important. The urgent plea. As I sat there, everything I had seen, everything I had felt, weighed heavily on me. The truth was clear now, in ways it never had been before. The doors are open now, but one day they will close. That's the truth you can't escape. That's the warning that I'm passing on to you today. And here's the hard part. What I saw, what I experienced, is something I can't forget. It's something that has changed the way I see everything, the world, people, even myself. But the scariest part isn't what I saw. No, the scariest part is that it's not too late for you. It's not too late to make a choice. Think about that for a moment. Right now, as you're watching this, you have time. You still have the chance to make the right choice. But what if that time is running out? I don't want you to be like those people I saw, trapped, screaming for a second chance. I don't want you to wait until it's too late. You don't have to wait until you're standing on the edge of that dark abyss, wondering how you ended up there. Because right now, right here, you still have a chance to turn around. The truth I'm sharing with you isn't just a warning, it's an invitation. You're not alone in this. There's still hope, and there's still time to choose the right path. Do you want to know what's waiting for you on the other side? I'm not just talking about what I saw, the city, the peace, the light. I'm talking about the love. The kind of love that fills you so completely, it makes every other fear, every other worry, fade away. The kind of love that says, you belong here. You're meant to be here. But you have to choose it. You have to make the decision. No one else can do it for you. What if you ignore it? What if you say, I'll think about it tomorrow, or I've got plenty of time? What if tomorrow never comes? What if you're left behind, just like so many I saw in that church, wondering what happened, wondering why no one told you the truth? I'm telling you now because I don't want you to be one of those people. The door is still open. But one day, it won't be. You have a choice. And this isn't just about what happens after you die. This is about how you live today. It's about your heart, your choices, your relationship with the truth. Will you live for what matters? Or will you keep waiting, keep putting it off until it's too late? I've seen the consequences of waiting. I've felt the weight of it. And now I'm passing it on to you. The truth can't be ignored. The truth is this: you are not promised tomorrow. But right now, you still have today. And with today, you can make the choice that changes everything. So, what will you do? Will you ignore the warning, or will you make the choice that leads to life, to peace, and to love? It's your decision. And it matters more than you can possibly imagine.
Wow. What you just heard isn't easy to process, but it's the truth we all need to face. Now, it's up to you. What will you do with it? If this story spoke to you, if you feel like it's time to make a change or pray for guidance, leave a prayer in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message before it's too late. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe because there's more truth to come. Together, we can spread this message and change lives. Don't wait, act now.